Alice Paul and her fight for women's rights. Alice Paul was born the oldest of 4 children on January 11, 1885 in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Paul was introduced to women's suffrage early in her life by her mother Tracy. Being a prominent leader in the National American Women's Suffrage Association, Paul was often taken to many of the meetings that were held. When asked why she spent her whole life seeking out women's rights, Paul always responded, "When you put your hand to the plow, you can't put it down until you get to the end of the road." By this quote, she implied she was not going to quit until she accomplished what she had started out to achieve. Alice Paul created the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage, which later evolved into the National Women's Party. Her leadership helped women to gain greatly from what they already had and allowed the accomplishments of many of her goals. In addition to her leadership goals, Paul succeeded greatly in school, which she received many degrees. Her leadership role and her educational accomplishments helped her greatly on her road to contributions she made not only in the U.S., but in other countries as well. In England, Paul participated in the militant suffrage movement, which was a movement made by females that was less silent and more military. This was a way of gaining rights and that she believed was the best one and was a step ahead of the women's way. Paul even explained that she believed the militant policy is bringing success. The agitation has brought England out of her lethargy, and the women of England are now talking of the time when they will vote instead of the time when their children will vote, which was the custom a year or two back. Her help with the militant suffrage greatly helped the women of England claim their rights and allowed them the right to vote much earlier than if they had gone the way the American women are, the silent way. But Paul believed that going the militant way was the right way and brought the militant suffrage back with her to America. In 1912, Paul and 2 friends, Lucy Burns and Crystal Eastman, went to Washington, D.C. to organize women's suffrage. They led an elaborate and massive parade towards the inauguration of Woodrow Wilson. However, on the way there, they met up with many male protesters who at first only attacked the suffragists with insults and obscenities, but then physically attacked the women to stop them from gaining ground. Although the police were present at the time, they made no move to help the women in their plight. This incident made the headlines the next day, and the popularity of women's suffrage grew greatly throughout the nation, not only by women, but supported men as well. The more the law tried to get rid of her, the more America supported her. To Wilson, she was a nuisance, and he did not want to deal with her. She was beginning to make him look like a hypocrite during World War I, so the police would do anything in their power to bring her down. The more they did, the more support she got. These incidents may to have at first seemed to have failed on Paul's part, but in reality, it was one of the great pushes the women needed to get back on track to equality and freedom. Alice Paul established the 19th Amendment, which would allow women to vote. The first thing she created to help on her way to her goals was the Silent Sentinels. The Sentinels would picket outside the White House with banners and signs with obscene and indecent sayings on them in the hopes to actually gain attention from the president. However, this ended up only getting them into prison. When in prison, the women were treated like crazy people. They were thrown into rat-filled cells and fed bad food. Many, including Paul, went on hunger strikes and were force-fed by the staff. Paul stated, "I practiced a hunger strike until November 11th. After that date, they force-fed me twice a day, except for one day when I was too ill to be touched. I have no complaints against the Holloway officials. I spent the whole time in bed because I refused to wear prison clothes. Each day I was wrapped in blankets and taken to another cell to be fed, the food being injected through my nostrils. During this operation, the largest wardress at Holloway sat astride my legs, holding my shoulders down to keep me from bending forward, and 2 other wardresses sat on either side and held my arms. Then a towel was placed around my throat, and one doctor from behind forced my head back, while another doctor put a tube in my nostril. When I reached my throat, my head was pushed forward. Twice the tube came through my mouth, and I got it between my teeth. My mouth was then pried open using an instrument. Sometimes they would even tie me to the chair with sheets. When news of the prison conditions and hunger strikes became known, the press, some politicians, and even public began demanding the women's release. Sympathy for the prisoners brought many to support the cause of women's suffrage. Upon her release, Paul hoped to ride this surge of goodwill victory. In 1917, after seeing the victory outcry from the way women were treated in prison, Woodrow Wilson changed his views on women's suffrage, and in 1919, the House, the Senate, and passed the 19th Amendment. After that, the battle for state ratification commenced. However, 3/4 of the states were needed to ratify this amendment. The battle for ratification came down to just the state of Tennessee in the summer of 1920. All that the state needed was a majority of the state legislature to vote for the amendment for it to become a law. The deciding vote cast was 24 Harry Byrne, the youngest member of the Tennessee Assembly. Originally intending to vote no, Byrne changed his vote after receiving a telegram from his mother asking him to support women's suffrage. On August 18, 1920, Tennessee ratified the 19th Amendment. Secretary of State Cole certified the ratification of the 19th Amendment 6 days later, and with just his signature using his pen, all American women gained the right to vote after the battle of so many years. August 26 would always be celebrated and known as the Women's Equality Day in the United States. Although most women left the suffrage party after the 19th Amendment had just begun, on the 75th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Convention, Hall announced her push toward the new amendment. She called the amendment Lucretia Mott Amendment. This amendment called for absolute equality, stating men and women shall have equal rights within the nation, subject to jurisdiction. Paul worked diligently to gain this new amendment and have it ratified, including gaining 3 law degrees and traveling to many different countries and establishing the World Women's Party in Geneva, Switzerland. She helped to gain ground for women all over Europe, and then she moved back to the United States to gain the same ground for women. For years she fought for the amendment, sacrificing her time. She became greatly involved in 1941 when she moved back and paid off all of her lead to coalition to succeed in adding the sexual discrimination clause to the Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. This guaranteed that colored women would have the same rights as colored men, and no one would discriminate against colored people's genders. However, she was not satisfied with this accomplishment and was still on track to establish her biggest goal, the Equal Rights Amendment. After the Equal Rights Amendment failed to pass in 1972, it was a big fall for Alice Paul, and although Alice Paul died in 1977, the stride to make the law is ongoing, and women in 1982 picked up the cause to help pass it. Paul felt so strong in her beliefs that she would sacrifice her life for her rights. She did not believe in waiting at decisions. She believed in fighting for rights, working hard for something, not letting it come easy to her or others. She did what she had to do in all of her protests and movements. She lived to an old age, and even from her home, weak, tired, and ill, she fought for the rights of all women. She would make phone calls just asking for states to pass the amendment. This is the kind of woman she was, strong and stubborn. If it was not for Alice Paul, women would not be standing here today with the rights that they have. Women would not have the same rights that a man does. There would be no voting or equality in jobs. Paul fought for the rights of all women, and in reality, all Americans to have the equal rights of each other and share liberties. It is what America was built on and how we have become such a strong, powerful nation. The 19th Amendment was a 150-year struggle, and with that struggle, America built the strong values, with the strong people, the strong Constitution in which these values were based on, and even bigger than those are the people that made America what it is. If it wasn't for those who fought for the rights and liberties that we have, those stubborn, strong-willed, unequal-minded people like Paul, America would not be as powerful as it is. Men and women from every race and cultural background built it up. She is one of those who fought for every right of every woman in this country.